All right, Tom Mulcair is on the line. So, Tom, let me start with something we've talked about a bunch through the course of the afternoon, and that's what's going on right now in the municipal administration here. First, yesterday with Dominic Olivier, today with Valerie Plante, and there's the issue of the commissioner, of course, on racism and what's happening there. So, there's a lot going on, and none of it is good for Valerie Plante.
No, she's in a real tailspin right now. And if you ask a pilot what happens when you're in a tailspin, sometimes the spiral becomes so tight that it's very hard to, even an experienced pilot can't pull themselves out. Look, tomorrow she's presenting a budget. And what did we find out? Well, not only does she have the whole Diane Olivier thing, and that's against the backdrop of something else we've spoken about weeks ago, which is this famous office for public consultation. Valerie Plante just ignores it when she wants to. They had the biggest consultation in the history of Montreal saying, please keep Camino roadway open onto the mountain, and she threw that recommendation in the garbage. So why does this thing even exist? Well, we find out it exists so that people who are close to her and close to the PQ can wind up doing things like traveling all over the world for no apparent reason that has anything to do with public consultations in Montreal. Valerie Plante tried to justify it for about 5 minutes last Tuesday, and then she had this pearl. She said, ça n'a pas de bon sens. It doesn't make any sense. We all knew at that point that Dominic Olivier was going to be in for the high jump, and sure enough, she had to resign. But the person who named her and the person who kept her there and the person who's ultimately responsible, of course, is the mayor of Montreal. Now, what did we find out about Valerie Plante? Well, she said, I made a terrible mistake. I charged for a whole bunch of wine, 8 bottles, if I'm not mistaken, at a single supper in Venice, and I'm going to, of course, have to pay it back. But it turns out that the Municipal Commission of Quebec, which is the law enforcement arm of municipal rules in the province of Quebec, is going to start an investigation. They just announced that today as well. And why? Well, because there are rules against using public money to buy alcohol. And so the tailspin continues. And we find out that the person who's still there at this famous office for municipal consultation, Madame Beaulieu, even though she's under pressure, as is her second in command, from Plante to resign, they're digging in their heels and they won't resign. The answer is really quite easy. Since you ignore this thing anyway, get rid of it. Stop wasting public money. And that leads to your final point about Montaigne and, her apparent, parti pris, that she leans one way in the whole Israel-Gaza issue. And, of course, if she's there to look after all Montrealers, whatever their background or whatever whenever they're the object of hate or discrimination or racism, she's supposed to be on it. But, of course, it turns out, I am told by other people in the milieu, that she has attended marches, pro-Palestinian marches, and some of her social media are pro-Palestinian. I happened to be at an evening where she was present and spoke on Saturday, and it was interesting because I sensed right away the same parti pris in what she said, because the organizers of the evening said, a lot of us had a chance to express ourselves, but this group and this evening, we got to be very careful. We're not a political group. And she still went up there, and she, from my memory of her words, she said, well, this is not political, it's human, and we need a ceasefire. But of course, that would mean that Israel would not be able to fight back after the horrific, terrible a terrorist attack of October 7th. So if she's not capable of doing that job with an even keel, and you can't have your own prejudged feelings if you're supposed to be a person fighting prejudice, then obviously the calls for her to step down would be, I think, entirely appropriate.
Yeah, we actually will have someone, because the Canada for Israel and Jewish Affairs is asking for exactly that, for her to step down. And that's something Valerie Plante, again, will have to decide if she's going to do or not.
Right, but at some point, when she's going to be presenting her budget tomorrow, just think of the average worker at the City of Montreal. Like many employers, there's going to be a Christmas party. Oh, no, except this year there's not, because we have to have a little bit of belt tightening because times are tough. So whose belt gets tightened? The workers. 1,800 managers share tens of millions of dollars of bonuses for their outstanding work running the City of Montreal, because everything is perfect. And there are no orange cones or anything, no mess-ups in terms of the planning.
Tongue firmly
everything
planted in cheek. Okay, I get it.
Everything is perfect in the City of Montreal. So they all get these bonuses. And yet the workers are told no Christmas party. And yet we find out that Madame Plante is able to bill 8 bottles of wine when she's in Venice for a supper. I think that the average person who works for the City of Montreal is going to start scratching their head, if not saying a few things out loud. And this is going to really start to hurt Valerie Plante and her administration.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. When do the calls come for her resignation? Because, I mean, it's fine and dandy to accept the resignation of your second in charge. Although, I'd like your opinion on the fact I find it strange personally that she's keeping one job while giving up another. If you've lost the public confidence and your situation with the money has become too much of a distraction for you to continue in your duties, how come you can do one job and not the other? And then to that, I'll just add, Tom, and the person responsible for you being in that position keeps their job as well? This seems strange to me.
The most important thing for Madame Plante, and we knew this a week ago today, that she could not have Dominique Olivier there tomorrow for the budget. It was just not possible for her to be the person explaining the budget. The rest, I guess they figure that they can manage. But at some point, you've got to put two and two together and realize that this is a deep-rooted problem of administrative incompetence, basically, or laissez-faire in terms of public administration with public money, by the way. That's what this is about.
Tom, is it fair? Maybe this is a very naive question. The idea that you could plead ignorance here and I didn't know, I wasn't sure, I just went ahead and did it, and it would be someone else's job to say, yes, you could, or no, you couldn't?
Right. But when you go through these things one by one, and whether it's, municipally or federally or provincially, you always get the shrugged shoulders and the hands in the air. But what happened to the notion of responsibility of the people who are responsible? Because the person in charge of the city is Valérie Plante. And so she's pointing, as you correctly say, to the ones around, oh, you're gone. Oh, you walk the plank. Oh, I've already asked you to resign and you haven't left yet? Oh, we'll have to figure out what to do with that. And the same thing federally, some of them just get to stick around despite the worst boondoggles you've ever seen, and same thing provincially. So at some point, it's going to have to be up to taxpayers/voters to send a clear message that we don't want this anymore. We want people who are responsible and who accept responsibility. They want these big jobs. They want everything that comes with it. Well, then start assuming that responsibility and what comes with it.
Bushram and does she have to resign?
Well, I think that in the overall circumstance, it's very difficult to see how she can be credible in saying that she's there about racism, systemic racism. There have been dozens and dozens of racist, anti-Semitic attacks. And from what I've seen, she hasn't said a word about them. There have been schools that have been shot at in the Jewish community. From what I've seen, she hasn't said a word about them.
She hasn't, yeah.
So if she's got one side of this, that is her side, how indeed can she fight against prejudice when she's prejudging herself from all appearances anyway?
Tom, I'm going to shift topics here because we're going to run out of time. We saw this story today. I see Greg Kelly's already posted about this. The provincial government says, hey, listen, not a bad time to invest somewhere around $6 or $7 million to bring the Los Angeles Kings training camp and a couple of exhibition games to Quebec City. I'm sorry, what planet is this decision coming from?
It is absolutely mind-boggling. So, for people who might have missed it, there's a lovely, huge hockey arena, something close to the Bell Center up in Quebec City called the Centre Vidéotron. It was built with hundreds of millions of mostly taxpayers' dollars, and it is absolutely a wonderful place to eventually bring an NHL team. Great, full stop. So what they've decided to do is take between $5 and $7 million of taxpayers' money so that the Los Angeles Kings can come and play 2 preseason exhibition games, one against Boston, one against, I believe, Florida, and a couple of warm-ups and practices and the like, because this is going to be really good. It's like this is the example that Eric Girard gave. It's like the President's Cup of golf. No, it's not. And it's like the Grand Prix. No, it's not.
Yeah.
And so they're convincing themselves that this is going to really bring in a lot of people to Quebec City and a lot of money. It is a very bizarre decision, and it reminds me, if nothing else, of the decision back in the spring, and I backed that decision because I always thought that M&As were underpaid. But that decision to give themselves the 30% raise is sticking to them like glue in the current negotiation. How do you tell teachers and nurses that they get 10.3% when you gave yourself a 30% raise? It's going to be the same thing here. Yeah. And sure enough, after I made that prediction earlier today, the nurses union came out with pictures of the Hanson brothers. At least they've got a good sense of humor in their social media. For people who might not know the reference, the Hanson brothers were 3 guys, wore glasses, and they were playing for the Chiefs, Paul Newman's team in the wonderful movie Slapshot. So they're just mocking the fact that they've got $7 million, but they were told last week, sorry, there's no money for teachers. There's just no money. And there's no money whatsoever for nurses. There's nothing we can do. And they come up with $7 million for millionaires, because every single hockey player in the NHL is a millionaire. And and they all play for owners who are billionaires. They've got millions of dollars of taxpayers' money to shovel to them. This is bonkers. This is the worst political decision you could possibly imagine, and I'd love to know what they're smoking in the offices of François Legault and company in Quebec City, because if they were selling that at the SQDC, maybe we'd start getting rid of our budget deficit.
Well said, Tom Mulcair. Thank you so much for that. I
Talk to you soon.
don't get this at all.
Nope.